From the outside, they were the perfect family. A quiet home, no history of trouble. Then one night, everything inside that house collapsed. Tonight, you're about to hear the true life story of a family that appeared flawless until a single night exposed years of hidden tension. By the end of this video, you'll know what investigators uncovered, who was held responsible, and how the court ultimately ruled in a case that shocked an entire community. They lived in a peaceful suburban neighborhood. Well-kept lawns, friendly neighbors, and no police history. When emergency services were called just after midnight, responders expected a routine medical emergency. Instead, they walked into a scene that was anything but. Inside the home, they found one family member deceased. The remaining family members were distraught, but their story was consistent. It was a terrible, tragic accident. There was no forced entry, no signs of a struggle, no obvious motive. At first glance, their explanation almost made sense. Almost, but for the seasoned detectives arriving on the scene, something felt off. The air in the house was thick with more than just grief, it was heavy with unspoken words. The initial account was plausible, but it was just a little too neat, a little too clean. The officers began to dig deeper, sensing that the real story was buried somewhere beneath the surface of this picture-perfect tragedy. Detectives noticed the inconsistencies almost immediately. The timeline of events seemed to shift with each retelling. Key details didn't align, and the physical evidence at the scene began to raise quiet red flags. Small, seemingly insignificant details contradicted the family's narrative. The positioning of the body, the state of the room, it just didn't add up to a simple accident. The investigators knew they needed a more objective perspective, so forensic examiners were brought in to take a closer look. They meticulously documented the scene, collecting trace evidence that the family might have overlooked in their panic. It was a painstaking process, but it was a crucial one. Because while human memory can be faulty and stories can change, physical evidence often tells an unshakable truth. The entire case was about to hinge on what the science would reveal. The turning point came with the medical examiner's report. It was definitive and chilling. The cause of death was not an accident. It was manual strangulation. The detailed findings showed clear patterns of restricted airflow and blood circulation injuries that could not have been caused by a fall or any other accidental scenario. This single, stark conclusion shifted the entire investigation from a tragic accident into a homicide. The police were no longer just comforting a grieving family. They were now investigating a murder that had occurred within the walls of that very home. The focus narrowed intensely. If there was no forced entry, it meant the killer was likely someone already inside the house when the 911 call was made. The questions changed from what happened to who did this, and every family member who had insisted it was an accident was now a potential suspect in a murder investigation. With the cause of death established as homicide, investigators turned their focus inward, peeling back the layers of the family's public image to examine their private dynamics. Behind the calm, polished exterior, they found signs of deep-seated issues that had been simmering for years. There was evidence of long-standing emotional strain, significant control issues, and a history of arguments that were never reported to anyone. Friends and neighbors described them as quiet and reserved, but police interviews started to reveal a different picture. It was a family that valued appearances above all else, keeping their conflicts carefully hidden from the outside world. Experts in domestic psychology later explained that tension within a family doesn't always manifest as overt violence. Often, it's a quiet, crushing pressure that builds silently over time through manipulation, emotional control, and unspoken resentments. It's a pressure that can build and build, unseen by anyone, until one day, it suddenly and catastrophically erupts. The final breakthrough came from a source that has become indispensable in modern investigations: digital evidence. Detectives obtained warrants to search the family's phones and computers, and what they found provided the missing context. Messages sent earlier that fateful evening revealed a heated, explosive confrontation taking place inside the home just hours before the death. The digital timeline they constructed painted a picture of escalating anger and conflict, directly contradicting the family's story of a peaceful night. When investigators confronted one specific family member with this digital timeline, alongside the damning forensic findings from the medical examiner, their story began to visibly unravel. The calm demeanor cracked, the carefully constructed lies fell apart under the weight of the evidence. And eventually, investigators say the truth of what really happened that night finally emerged from the silence. The confession, when it came, was a torrent of emotion, revealing a story of a family pushed to its absolute breaking point. According to the court testimony that followed, the confrontation had spiraled completely out of control. What began as a bitter argument, fueled by years of resentment, escalated into a physical altercation. In a moment of rage, a fatal act was committed. It was not premeditated, but it was decisive. The attempt to stage the death as an accident was a frantic, desperate act of self-preservation born from panic and fear. But it was a clumsy attempt, one that couldn't stand up to scrutiny. The science told a different, more brutal story. The forensic evidence, from the ligature marks to the trace DNA, was irrefutable. It confirmed the confession and laid bare the violence that had been hidden behind the closed doors of that seemingly perfect home. The illusion of the flawless family was shattered forever, replaced by the grim reality of a life taken and another life ruined. The case proceeded to a public trial. Over several weeks, prosecutors methodically presented their case to the jury. They laid out the medical findings from the autopsy, the digital records that chronicled the final hours, and expert testimony on both forensic science and the psychology of domestic conflict. The defense argued that the death was unintentional, a tragic outcome of a fight that went too far, but the evidence of a cover-up was overwhelming. After deliberating, the jury returned a guilty verdict. The individual responsible was convicted of second-degree murder. The judge handed down a sentence of 25 years to life in prison, with the possibility of parole only after serving the minimum term. The remaining family members were not charged with any crime, left to grapple with the devastating consequences of that night. The home was eventually sold to a new family, its dark history scrubbed clean. But the case left a permanent and haunting mark on the community. It served as a chilling reminder that you never truly know what goes on behind closed doors. Because sometimes the most dangerous situations don't come from strangers lurking in the dark. They come from the suffocating silence inside a home that, from the outside, looks absolutely perfect. Thank you for watching. If you found this story compelling, be sure to follow Crazy Crime Diary for more true crime stories, psychological cases, and investigations that reveal what's hidden just beneath the surface. Stay safe, and we'll see you in the next one.